Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Roundtable on Anti-Asian Hate. My name is Min, and I'm very happy to be your host today. We're glad to see that people have joined this very important discussion. So, while the session today is centered on the topic of anti-Asian hate, our talk is still hosted for the most part on land that has been colonized. And to remain silent is to continue our compliance with the issue. So before we start into the discussion, I would like to take this time to acknowledge that Marianopolis College is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst indigenous peoples, including Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations and unceded traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. So let's introduce our panel now. So please, could you say your name, your profession, your pronouns, and the age-old question of where are you from?
Okay, I think I'll go first. So, hi everyone, my name is Zhu Zhao. I'm from China. I was born in China and I came to Canada at the age of 11, so rather recent compared to some of us. It was it was a nice experience for me and it helped me learn English and French after. And currently I'm studying at health science at Marinopolis.
I guess I could go next. So my name is Serena Zhang. I'm a second year also health student. I was born in Canada, but both my parents are from China. And my pronouns are she and her.
All right, then I could go next, I suppose. My name is Charles Margo Elcano, and I was born and raised in the Philippines. I moved to Canada 3 to 4 years ago as an international student, and I'm currently studying health sciences as a first year at Marinopolis.
I can go next. Hi, my name is Karis Wang, and I'm born in Canada, but both of my parents are immigrants from China, and I'm a student in social sciences at Marinopolis.
I suppose I should go next. Hi, I'm Fian Xing. I was originally from China, and my pronouns he and him, and I'm a law study and justice student.
Obviously, now we also have to introduce the guest of honor, Mr. William Dere. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay. Yes, I was born in China, but I came to Canada many, many years ago. I came to Canada when I was 7 years old. Yeah, my grandfather first came to Canada in 1909, and he paid a $500 head tax. My father came in 1921, and he also paid a $500 head tax. And then my family was separated for 3 decades by the Chinese Exclusion Act. So that's the background of my family. And when I came to Canada, my parents were separated, like I said, for many years. My father went back to China every 5 to 10 years to have some children. So when the Exclusion Act was repealed, my father finally got his citizenship. So for 62 years of Canada's history, there was standing legislation against the Chinese Canadian community. So xenophobia is nothing new to the Chinese community here in Canada because of the anti-Chinese racism. So for a long time, I've been involved with the head tax Chinese Exclusion Act redress movement, and we finally got an apology and a very limited redress from the Canadian government in 2006. And so after that, I guess I started writing my book to try and record the history of the Chinese here in Canada. And Professor Chu tells me that a copy of my book is in your library. So if you get a chance, have a look at it. It's called Being Chinese in Canada. And since then, with all the things that are going on here in Canada and around the world, I've been involved with the anti-racist, anti-Asian hate movement. Not as active as I was in the past, but I do support and I do voice our concerns related to anti-Asian hate here in Canada. So I'll just turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, William. Most of us here are living in Canada, and we do identify racially as Asian. To you, what exactly does it mean to be Canadian or to be Asian?
Yeah, well, I guess that some of us will be talking about how do you feel you belong to which to which, let's say, to which ethnicity, which I do agree. Like sometimes it's all about your feelings. Like you feel like you belong more to Canadian, more you are more a Canadian than a Asian. Well, sometimes that's what it is because maybe you've grown up in Canada and you didn't know much about the Asia. Well, that's perfectly fine. But sometimes I do feel that it's also from the perspective of others, how others identify you, because you may think you're an Asian or you're a Canadian all you want, but if someone's for example, I have a cousin. She thinks herself more like a Canadian, but as she has yellow skins and brown eyes, so everyone that looks at her, well, they think that she is an Asian, she is a Chinese, and well, it's not a big deal, but it means that she can't deny this part of the identity from herself. So it's not like 100% a choice, but you can. I think that you can choose at some degree like what you can become.
I totally agree with you. And I don't know, my experience might be different because I was born here. But for like a big part of my life, I didn't really have this question. I knew something was weird because I felt like we had different experiences with my white counterpart friends. And I just remember being like watching the Olympics and being like, which country do I root for? Oh, I'll just root for both. It's fine. But slowly, the statement that you applied that it's how other perceive us, like to which identity we belong to depends on other people. I have an experience about that. So I still skate with a lot of like my coaches, and they're skaters, and most of them are white, like Quebecois. And they're like the sweetest people ever, like bless their soul. But I just like sometimes they make comments such as, oh, Harina, I mean, you're not a true Quebecois. I mean, you're, and then they like stumble on their words and then they don't know what to say. And like, I get what they mean, but like, it's always kind of awkward. Or sometimes they're like, oh, yeah, so you're my favorite Chinese, or you're my favorite Chinese person. And I'm like, yeah. But even though every time I go back in China, I feel like a total stranger. Like if here I feel uncomfortable, when I go back to China, it's a whole different thing. Like people see me, they might think not even the way I dress, because the fashion is different a bit here and there. So whenever I speak, they're like, "Oh, your Chinese is so good," and I don't know. It's a pretty funny experience. Just live, I guess, not exclusion, but something similar in both countries.
Can I like add on to it? Basically, like I was born in Montreal, but I like lived in some village like in the middle of nowhere in Quebec, and I was like literally the only person like the only Asian person in the village. And so like when I went to school, it was quite awkward, especially like in kindergarten, because nobody like really saw an Asian person, right? And then like and then so I always like thought I was like white because of the area I grew up with. I was like the only Asian person, so like my only Asian things were like my parents and all. And then they were quite busy, so I essentially grew up really whitewashed until like yeah, pretty much. And I remember like in first grade or in second grade, I moved to Montreal again, and they were like, and it was like in the West Island, so then again it was still quite white, like as an area. And I remember like getting comments like saying like, oh, like they were pulling their eyes, or like they're saying like, oh, like is the pinky like the Chinese middle finger? And like I was like 6 at the time. I obviously didn't know what that was. Um, but yeah, so like growing up, I always like thought of myself like, oh, like I'm Canadian, I'm like born here and all, and like why wouldn't I be considered Canadian? because like I have like full Canadian citizenship. But then like when others look at me, they're like, yeah, but like you're fully Asian, and then like why can't you speak Chinese properly? And I'm like, well, am I like really Chinese like that? And yeah, like I went back to like the mainland like twice, and then both times I felt really like left out because of language barriers and all of those things. So like, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I'm curious. Like this applies to everyone, not just curious. But did anyone ever like do that Chinese, Japanese, Korean thing like with the eyes?
Oh yeah, I had that. I had
God.
that.
Sorry, what is
that-
this? Like with the eyes?
Oh, it's like it's so racist. It's like Chinese, Japanese, Korean eyes are like different shapes. It was an Asian person. I think it was a Chinese little girl. I don't know if she knew what it meant, but it was actually a Chinese girl that showed it to me the first time. I'm like,
yeah, I didn't get the Korean one because like it was like 2008, and like nobody knew what Korea was, and unless if you were like Asia.
Oh my god, this Asia, like, yes, China, and Japan.
And then so
both along with the Philippines, I had this one friend, the first friend. I'm good with him now, but it's still like an inside joke between us that he thought the Philippines was actually in like well, it's technically still in Asia, but he thought the Philippines was in the Middle East or something like next to Dubai or yeah. Because probably of my skin color, he assumed that I was Muslim, but well, it was a rough start to a friendship, but yeah, we're good.
Oh my god.
Mr. Dere, do these experiences sound familiar to your own, or was it completely different during your generation?
Oh no, I think it's very much same experience that I had when I was younger. That when I started going to school here, I wanted to just fit in. I didn't want to be Chinese. In fact, it was people who were non-Chinese that brought up this issue of me being Chinese rather than myself being Chinese. But after having lived this experience for such a long time, I think the only thing that I can add to this conversation is the question of identity awareness and to take pride in one's identity. Because one thing that my father taught me, and he lived most of his adult life, or all of his adult life here in Canada. And so his way of coping with the racism and the discrimination was his own identity awareness. So whenever something bad happens, he would just say, oh yeah, that's because we're Chinese. Because that's the way society was in those days, that the Chinese did not have any rights to certain jobs or any job to compete with the white man. And so he was able to, I guess, to survive and to cope with this understanding of himself as a Chinese person. And today, the only advice I would give to young people who are feeling this way in terms of being lost is that if you use whiteness as a standard for yourself, then that's going to be a problem, because you will never achieve whiteness and you will never achieve the privilege of whiteness. So you're not a white person. So just understand your own identity as an Asian person, as a Chinese person, Korean or Filipino person, and take pride in that identity and establish yourself that you belong here as an Asian person here in Quebec or in Canada, because we have been here for over 150 years. We've built the railways, we've served the food, we've washed your clothes in laundries. So we have a right to be here because we've done the work, we've labored, for the society that we live in. And so if you want to apply your white privilege to me, I don't want to hear it. In fact, I will stand up for my own identity, and I will not accept any white BS from anybody. But that's because of the experience that I've had, years of struggling against racism, and so that's the only thing I can offer to you is my experience. Take pride in your own identity. Never be ashamed of yourself of us being Asian, because Asian people make up more than half the world. So just think about that.
Thank you for all that advice, William. Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up like establishing your own identity because we live in Canada, right? And there's always this expectation of what an Asian should look like. And often I've also heard comments where like, you don't do that, you're not Asian enough. And there's also floating around this idea of the model minority myth that like all Asians should be hardworking, they always have a sense of responsibility. So what has been your experiences with trying to grapple with your Asian identity?
I guess I can go ahead. I actually have really specific examples. Maybe people in this discussion have also felt the same way, but I'm from a very conservative, Catholic, French high school. And like no one was explicitly racist because that would just be rude. But it was always a little comments like, oh, of course you're good at math. Hey, can you help me with the homework? Oh, well, of course you're going to have 100 because you're Asian. Like, it's like backhanded compliments that I'm sure like everyone here got at some point. But I remember being, and I'm a bit ashamed to say this, because of all the stereotypes and comments associated with the Asian identity, I was always ashamed of being Chinese, just like William said, like, you shouldn't be, you should assert yourself. But at that time, I was really ashamed. It was, especially the environment, it was really toxic. Like, you know, Quebec pride, like be Québécois, parle français, speak French, and all that. And so I tried so hard to move away from the stereotype. I hung out less with Asian people. I purposefully try to make like white friends, just to like not be one of those Asians, you know, one of the good grades Asians, one that plays volleyball, plays piano, even though I did everything. Like I just tried to move myself away from the image. And I don't know if that worked, but it did make me feel really awful because like I was basically rejecting a part of myself that I could never move away from because of my appearance.
So you said that you still did play piano and volleyball and all of these stereotypically Asian things. So how did you handle that?
I'm trying to think. I guess not hide, because we all knew a bit, but I did like shy away. I remember drawing something, and then my friend was like, oh my god, it's really cool, let's show it to the teacher. And the teacher was like, oh my god, it's so cool. I feel like all Asians have like that special gene that makes them draw better. And I just remember feeling so insulted. At that point, I wasn't sure why, but now I know it's because like he didn't attribute that talent to me, he attributed it to my race. What, that doesn't even make sense. But anyhow, but like that, I feel like, I don't know about y'all, sorry if I'm talking a lot, but coming to Marianopolis has really helped me a lot, facing that self-hate I was imposing on myself previously, because there's so many Asians. And I remember being like, oh, why am I going to Marianopolis? I remember people asking me, what CJEP are you going? And like Marianopolis, and they're like, oh, like the other Asians, like, yeah, like all the Asians. And then now I look back and I'm like, oh, Karina, no, stop that. But yeah.
Can I add to the conversation?
Totally.
Yeah, so I took karate before, which just adds on to the stereotype part. But I started like pretty late, and like I remember we were doing like this thing called like a kata, which is like, from what I remember, it's like a sequence of moves or something, and like we had one for our exam, so we were obviously practicing it and like sweating. And then at one point, because I was like really near the exam, so like, we had to like practice, and if we screwed up like one move, like a minor detail, like your foot wasn't positioned like 50 degrees, it was positioned 45 degrees, you like have to reset the whole thing. And then so at one point, I was the one who messed up, and then the teacher didn't mean any harm with it, but he was like, Karis, how did you screw up? You're Asian. And then like it was a joke, he wasn't white, so like I like laughed it off because like, you know, like but like we were like, how old was I think it was like grade 6 or something. So like I think kids will have like some like type of critical thinking, but I still felt kind of like, okay, it's like funny, but like maybe not, you know? And then like I remember in like when I around like grade 6, like when I was like heavily into anime. I'm pretty sure like we've all had that like one phase where like we just like, well, like, yeah, I'm still into that, but because of like time, I don't really like watch anything anymore. But I remember like just like really wanting to be Japanese, and like this sounds so wrong because like I'm Chinese, so like you know the the colonist thinking comes, and
Yes.
and then and then so like you know because I'm Chinese, but I was like very whitewashed, and when people like say like hey like is it true that you do this, and then like I wouldn't know because sometimes it's like specific to a region in China. And then like, you know, like if I can't explain like my own culture, then like would I really be like Chinese? So then I was like, so then like with like all like the influx of like anime I was consuming, I was like, you know what? Let's pretend I'm Japanese instead. Like I didn't go too far into it because like I know like it would be so embarrassing, like the typical like 12-year-old like weeaboo like pretending like really wanted to be Japanese. I wasn't like that hardcore, but like a part of me really wished I was Japanese because like I saw how well it was like received compared to like Chinese media. Like what Chinese media is out there that's localized in the West besides like two Chinese anime that came out like 2016. So yeah, and in terms of like academics, I wasn't really like a good student. Like I would get good grades, but I was also like a huge procrastinator. So sometimes I wouldn't do well. And then I just like felt like people wouldn't say it to me out loud, but I would still like feel like pressure to get good grades like innately, you know? Because like I feel like just people would like assume that I'm like really good and all. And I remember like at the beginning of Sec 5, we were like doing a review of like Sec 4 math, and then like there were students like around me that were like, and I had like an Asian girl in the back, and we were both friends, and we would compare answers, and then like the girls around us would just like ask like, hey, like Karis, like is this good? And then like can you check? And then like I just get so nervous because I'm like, what if I screw this up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that. Like, I feel like this model minority myth, it promotes us because of the stereotypes of us being hardworking, independent. It causes us to internalize it and have this constant fear of failure. Like in the end, we internalize it and we have the fear of failure of not upholding these stereotypes. And this has happened to me so often, and because of that, it I internalize it in a harmful way, as if like I'm like people pleasing, and as a result, I don't set healthy boundaries in my workload and work safety. And for instance, back in high school, I remember when there's group works, because I feel like since as I was new there and I hadn't really settled in the community yet, and all these white people, because in my school I didn't see a lot of people of color, minority groups in the school that I attended. So it was really they feel like such an overwhelming presence to me. And so I didn't know how to approach them as my group mates. Instead, I thought, okay, I'll just do like all of these works. And if I give it to them, then everyone will be happy. Like I don't have to ask them to, okay, you have to do this work. I don't have to I don't need to. So in a way, I'm actually doing the group, but at the same time, I'm not imposing onto them that I'm the leader and that I have to be bossy and all of that. And as a result, it's as if well, in the end, it's bad, of course. It's just I'm putting too much into myself, and I'm not negotiating properly to get what I also deserve and all that. It comes in a fear of asking help when it's necessary and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, legit. Sometimes you feel like there's like a hidden hierarchy. I don't know how to say it in English, but like, did you ever feel that and unconsciously, and always like made interactions awkward?
Yeah.
often. Yeah,
I like the
definitely.
perspective rules you. Like if you like none of my math teachers were Chinese, they still love maths. Like what's wrong with mathematics, right? Like if you are good at with math, just shine. If you are not that good, that's how it is. Like don't be afraid to do anything or not to do anything just because like they think you are Chinese or not. Like this is not the point. Like the things themselves, piano, math, or animes, they have nothing to do with like identities. They are just what you are and what you love. Like for me, like you can hear that I have a strong accent because I learned English and French rather late. But like before, it was even worse. Like at some point, I couldn't even like use straight sentences to communicate. And yeah, so the image I gave was like really Chinese. Like not now me was Canadian at some point. And yeah, so because of that image, they always think what I should do or I shouldn't do. Like at the beginning, I thought, yeah, so you think I'm good at math? Sure, I'm good at math. Yeah, fine. But in the end, I choose to like I'm good at math. That has nothing to do with you. You think I'm good or not? Like I'm just good at the math. Period. And this is what it is, because in the end of the day, you become what you want to become, not what they want you to become. That's what matters, I think.
I see.
It is hard though. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, sorry. I just wanted to ask William because I think he did do an engineering degree. Was that it? And I think most of us are in the sciences in some way. I know Karis and Fei Yang, you're in social science and law. But what was your own experience like being in the STEM field like that?
Well, that was a long time ago, and I guess the main reason why I went into engineering was economical. It was economics is to get a job, and at that time, I guess the best way to get a job is to learn engineering, get an engineering degree. So, but that didn't stop me from branching out, in terms of knowledge, because I was very curious. I wanted to find out how the world works, not just how machinery and algorithms and programming works, but how the world itself works. And this is why I got into engineering. But I guess you brought up a very interesting question, or key question, in terms of stereotyping and moral minority. Because when you stereotype an Asian person into the sciences, into engineering, into the technical field, then that's all you're known as the IT guy. And the IT guy will be stuck in middle management, because they won't offer you the promotions, and they won't give you the head of the department kind of jobs, because you're good. You're stereotyped into solving problems, solving mathematical problems, and so that's the negative aspects of stereotyping. And I can't think of any positive aspects other than making our own stereotypes, and whoever was doing the kata, become Bruce Lee, and be your own stereotype of being a badass in karate, and you can kick somebody else's ass if they try to say bad things about you. But anyway, seriously, the moral minority does a very bad disservice to our community, because essentially it was thought up by a bunch of academics, or maybe a few academics in the US in the early 70s, and using the Chinese as the moral minority, because they were hardworking, and few of them excelled in university, but they did not see the Chinese community as a community like all other communities. We're part of the society. So our community was also a class community, class society. very few of us make it to the top and go into Harvard or Yale or whatever and become doctors and engineers and lawyers. The majority of us were working day-to-day jobs to earn a living for ourselves and our families. So you have to remember that. So the moral minority does not recognize that the majority of Asians here in Canada earn less money than non-Asians. Because people think that we're Chinese or Asians, that we will be at the top of the social ladder, but we're not. And so the only reason why the moral minority was set up was to set a minority up to keep them in its place and to offer it up as a model for other minorities and essentially divide various minorities. And that's always the trick that the ruling class would like to use, is to divide and conquer. And so when you divide the Chinese moral minority from, say, the blacks or the Hispanics in the United States, then that's the first step for you to be able to oppress these people. And at the same time, by not recognizing the day-to-day struggles of the Chinese community, then they don't have to do anything other than to recognize the fact that the Chinese moral minority was supposedly very quiet, very diligent, hardworking, and so you can just put them aside. You don't even have to accommodate them or put in policies to help the day-to-day wage earners within the Chinese community. So these are the dangers of buying into these stereotypes and the moral minority myth.
I think it's also interesting that Karis, earlier you talked about how like Japanese media was a lot more well received than Chinese ones. Specifically for William, was there something like this, especially during the time of like the head tax?
You're talking about the media, how the media treated?
I know, like you talked about the head tax that was here in Canada.
Yes.
During your father and your grandfather's time. Was it only for Chinese people, or was there like mostly if they saw you as Asian, then they give you the head tax?
No, the head tax applied just to Chinese people, to Chinese immigrants. The history of Canada is such that minorities, the oppression of minorities is a historical, long-running fact here in Canada. The Chinese were brought over to build the Canadian Pacific Railway out in Western Canada. And if you talk about moral minority, the Chinese workers were the moral minority because they were willing to work at half the wages of the whites and in the most dangerous jobs. So how moral do you want it? To have these Chinese workers who were expendable. So if you want to apply that kind of criteria to it, yes, we were a moral minority, but after the railroad was finished, Canada did not want any more immigrants from China to come to Canada, and so they imposed the head tax in 1885 once the CPR was completed. And that lasted until the head tax lasted until 1923 when they brought in the Chinese Exclusion Act. It was purely applying to the Chinese, but other minorities were not spared because when you have a time of difficulty, you want to find scapegoats, and that's why even today, with the pandemic, people, the media, government, they're looking for scapegoats, and so who is so easily identifiable in terms of scapegoats? Asians, and anybody that looks Chinese. Even Inuit people have been, told to go back to China because they look a bit like Chinese and Asians, and so this is something that I think we all should be aware of. is in a time of economic difficulty, we will become targets of scapegoats, and this is something that we need to stand up against. And so it wasn't just Chinese. I mean, the Japanese Canadians were interned during the Second World War, and all the property were taken away from them, were stolen from them. And I don't need to get into the indigenous peoples. I mean, I'm sure you've all study how the indigenous people were dispossessed by the Canadian ruling class and the white colonial powers that took over the land. So, so having gone on this rant, I've forgotten your original question.
Yeah, it's just it was just that, like Kara said, Japanese media today is a lot more well received than like Chinese media. So, would you say that there exists a hierarchy of Asian ethnicities?
Well, maybe the powers that be would like to establish something like that in order to divide people, to divide the Asian community. But then again, you have to look at what the media does and what the media says, because the Japanese media, from Japan anyway, they align themselves very much with American media, and so so in that way, there's not much space between them and the U.S. media in terms of how they view the world. Whereas the Chinese media, of course, is seen as the enemy, and so anything that comes out of the Chinese media, their narrative is that you cannot trust them because anything that comes out of China is evil. It's because the Chinese government is not transparent. It's authoritarian. It's dictatorial. And so that's why you have this whole vilification of China in the last couple of years. I mean, 2 years ago, Chinese people were viewed favorably by the media and in public survey. Today, Chinese people are not viewed very favorably, and in the media and in the government. And I mean, when the government passes resolutions saying that China is genociding certain minorities, and we have to impose sanctions because there's so much human rights abuse in China. I mean, it cannot help but condition people to hate these kinds of abuses. And so today, the general survey is that the Chinese people are viewed very unfavorably by the general public, and that will have repercussions for Asian Canadians, for Chinese Canadians, and that's where the Asian hate comes from. I mean, it started with the pandemic because nobody understood, what that was, and then the media and the government, led by Trump, are saying that, well, it's the Chinese, it's the it's the Chinese flu, it's a Kung flu, it's the Chinese virus. And so once you start doing that, then you identify a minority for scapegoating, and these are the people that are responsible for the bad things that are happening to us. They don't look at their own government and all the bad policies that their own government is implementing. So a mysterious government over in China under the Chinese Communist Party is so easy to condition people to hate. And this is something that perhaps you should think about in terms of what the media does. The media is not the angel. The media is an instrument of the government to put forward its own narrative and to put forward the propaganda in order to get support. And so when you identify a certain minority, I think you can coalesce a lot of support for the media. Look at the CAQ here in Quebec. they rally the Quebec people to oppose the hijab and other religious minorities, here in Quebec with this Bill 21. And the survey has it that the majority of Quebec people, support this, and then they play up this identity politics here in Quebec to further divide people. And so this is something that I think young people should be aware of, and maybe for you to investigate and research on your own.
Yeah, I want to elaborate to what Professor Boone had just said. Lots of this have to do with you and us kind of mindset, where in the Western society, minorities such as us Asians and other POC communities seen as a alienated thing that poses as a threat to Western society as itself. You can see through with the history of colonizations and the mass genocide against indigenous people, and the measures that didn't take place during the 1960s and so forth, the oppression of Black communities as itself. I think the whole Western agenda is opposing its own strength of enforcing that competing power against whatever poses as a threat to their ideologies, even put forward by whatever Joe Biden yesterday addressed to Congress, said that they're competing against China in its race of build back America, build back this dominance, instead of cooperations. That's what China has been put forwarding. This mindset of just complete different ideology poses as a severe threat to any minority within Western society, as this is just seen as a blockade or the obstacle for them to grow in their own progressions. Seen forward with the rise of Soviet Union before, they seem as an adversary. The new adversary for them is China, and whatever put forward, whatever relates to China, it seems as a threat, and that is hard for Asian community within North America and Canada to grow itself, because this idea from systemic level is against our community, even put forward by our parliamentary Chinese MP who is from Don Valley North, Han Dong, when he was asking questions about the COVID-19, everyone turned forward and look at him for an answer. This is just not right. It like in the systemic level, we're being targeted in multitude ways, even in governmental levels. They have a prejudice, and this is just been going on. It's a systemic problem. It's an ideological problem, and this needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting more and more political. I just want to bring it back with what we talk about media, because I feel like it's a binary thing. So the pressure that many Asians are having trying to live in an American world does not only come from American society, but it also comes from where we were from. Because I presume that many of us would have families, or if not grandparents, living back in Asia, and in my case, it's China. So like they care about us, so they will want to know like if we're doing good here, and they will look at the news. When we talk about the news, right? Just like we believe from our and by we I mean like Americans here, we believe from our news that China is dangerous, everything is censored, no one has human rights. Well, it's the same thing. They hear from their news that America is dangerous. Like there's mass shooting everywhere, hate crime happens every day. Like as a minority, you put your life on risk by walking on the street, which we know, well, it's not that much of the thing, right? But and don't get me wrong, like American news are better on being subjective. My point is that like the news is the only way they can get information, and they will believe that you're struggling to survive here, and they will worry about you. They will say, oh, like if you're struggling, why don't you come back to China? Like don't put yourself in danger. Like be safe, something like that. But I mean, wow, that's pure pressure. You know what I mean? Like it's really a binary thing. Like your families, like there are good intentions, they care about you, but like it's not their fault, it's not our fault, but the news, the media, the propagandas makes them think that we are struggling, and to prove that we are not, we are doing fine, we could achieve something here, we need to prove to them that we are good here. And that's why we're working harder and harder to trying to become someone, let's say.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to media, if it's possible, like with Chinese media. Have you guys heard of the game Genshin Impact by any chance? Like it's really big, right? And like we all know it's Chinese, right? Like cuz like I hope so. But then like the way that the English and localization was localized was very Japanese. Like they had like Genshin instead of Yuanshen. And then they also had the English and the Japanese voice actors on it because like they would know that a lot of like basic like weeaboos would like know these voice actors are like super popular and they will like buy the game, which makes money for MiHoYo, right? It's a smart marketing move, but at the same time, like I just also feel like they should include the Chinese cast in it because it's the original because it's like the original source material and all of that. And then I'm frequently on Twitter, which is already a yikes, but like there's like a lot of fans that are like being like xenophobic towards the game. Like I don't think they realize it. It's also there's this Chinese like inspired region in the game called Liyue. And then like a lot of like there's some people that like try to like pronounce it and I'm very grateful for it. And then they're like, oh, like, can you like teach me how like say like the specific name? And then like I'll like teach them and like it's okay if they don't get the pronunciations right. Like as long as they try, I'm very happy. But like there are like a lot of the big content creators that do stream the game, they are like kind of racist, like toward like what the names or the like the Chinese name, what the Chinese names of the characters that are from like the Chinese based country. Like I remember like going on YouTube and I was like, oh, like maybe I'll just like play like a small like a cute and funny Genshin video in the background while I do my work. And then like the YouTuber ended up like really butchering the name and like he sounded like he wasn't trying. Like there's a character named Xiangling in there. And then like I think like I just erased this from my memory, but I think the guy was literally saying ching chong. And I was like I was so disgusted by it. I just clicked out of the video. And like I just like can't stand it. And then like there's also how like some translation errors because like you know how like Chinese is like a language where like one sentence or like 4 words can mean like a whole paragraph, right? With like a lot of context, right? And then like there are like Chinese fans that are like doing fan translations or like modifying the official ones because it's like badly translated in English. But then like there are like these people that are like, oh, but like why should we listen to like the Chinese like that's the source material, by the way. Then like why should we like listen to like you like you're like a Chinese person? Like how would you know this game is like originally Japanese? Like it's also like the way how it's marketed and how like Japanese culture is seen as like a fetish almost. It's like it's so appealing and so romanticized. And like how like Chinese culture is like xenophobic. And like no, sorry, I phrased it wrong. Like how like people are like just like xenophobic and all that. And like I was pretty happy when I heard Genshin was popular because I was like, oh, like it's a Chinese game, like and there's like a Chinese region really early on in the game that people can explore and like they can like learn more about like Chinese culture and stuff. I was really grateful, but then like that's also the other side where like there are people that are like openly mocking their names and then like openly like mocking like Chinese concepts, like you know the concept of like sworn brothers and all that, like that's being like made fun of. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we'll give Batman another Chinese name when it's in China. So why can't we do the same, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and plus they are pronouncing Xiangling in the game for you. Can you try?
I know.
It's like try to imitate instead of Ching Chong.
I know, and then
like if you do the name horribly, like if you pronounce anything like Xianglings or anything, that's not a problem. Like you can pronounce it well, not a problem. But maybe like try at least.
Yeah, like there's
maybe Ching Chong is not necessarily the best way to do it.
There's also like what's worse is that there's like this video about how to pronounce the Liyue characters, the Liyue places, and like like I get that like by voice preference you might prefer the Japanese voice or like the voiceover or stuff, or like you prefer the Chinese one. I sometimes force myself to play fully in Chinese just so I can learn better, even though I'm illiterate for like 95% of the time, and I take 10 minutes to read one sentence. But I feel like because like people like Japanese so much, they also consider it the Japanese, like the original dubbing and all. And like I hear people like say like Titi, like someone was like, "Oh, this is wee wee." Like how do you?
Oh, next time I'm calling Superman Mr. Chow.
Yeah, Fei Yang, you had a comment?
Yeah, I will have a comment because I think in part of MiHoYo and its companies, it's reflect of how like the general like Chinese society view this problem. They're not educated in the matters of suppression of minorities outside China. They are not realize that the issue is that we need, like, Chinese community itself need to be educated on this matter furthermore, not just talking about us in this roundtable. I think in general purposes, we need unity within our community, and we need to bring people forward together to be more educated, to be more mindful in this matter. So when we oppose with those social issues that's come forward in our community, we wouldn't feel this much panicking. We're not going to experience less if we just brought forward and more educated in this matter and spread awareness more. Yeah.
Okay, Charles.
And yeah, just to further on add to what Fei Yang was saying, I feel like it all boils down back to also the exposure of children in education. And I feel like as much as we say, like we imagine a curriculum that explores the history of Asians in America and in Canada, such as what William talked about, for instance, how it was Asians who built the railway. Asians were the ones who were cleaning and washing and doing all these chores. And yet, I think there's the need also, because educators can't teach what they don't know, because inevitably most of us didn't learn anything about Asian American history in school. So I feel like there's also the need of educators needing to question the histories they were taught and the work to learn and work to learn it with a critical and inclusive eye. Like, and in the end, we need to dream that an education system where children are overwhelmed with expansive reading choices that celebrate the full complexity of our humanity. I mean, growing up, most of the AAPI characters I saw on the shelf were like sidekicks or stereotypes. Like, I want representation or choices to be robust and revelatory.
Definitely, Charles. And I think it's true. Stereotypes, like we think of them, yeah, no way people can be like that, but they do have real world effects, right? Because about a month ago, correct me if I'm wrong, there was that man who shot up several Asian women-owned massage parlors in Atlanta, and he claimed to have done so to eliminate temptations for his sexual addiction. And obviously, with COVID-19 also, there has been that surge in anti-Asian hate crimes because people think we're a virus. So knowing this, how does it make you feel? Have you changed your lifestyle anyway? Are you concerned?
Well, I mean, I'm definitely not going out, but not necessarily because of any any Asian hate, but I do realize that the uprising Asian hate feelings is linked to the pandemic. But I mean, well, like conspiracy theories put aside, like we don't get to choose where the viruses comes from, right? Like it's no one's fault. And but I feel like it is what it is. Like so at some point, people are gonna try to find the scapegoat, like William was saying. And for this time, we are being the scapegoat. Like not that they don't get that it's not necessarily our fault, but they may want to try to find a scapegoat to make them feel better. Like it's not that our society can't defeat a virus. It's just because that China is trying to attack us with a virus, etc. Something like that. I feel like at first I don't that's not true, and I hate those people who are saying it. But secondly, like how do you plan to deal with that? Like, is there anything I can do to change the matter? I'm not sure. Like, am I just going to accuse them of being racist? Like, who do I accuse? Like, there are literally like millions of people out there who say, or who might not say, but who thinks the same thing. Who do I accuse them? Like, we're minorities at the end of the day. And when a majority thinks the same, well, I feel like sometimes is there anything I can do? That's the question I'm asking myself.
Yeah, Fei Yang?
Yeah, I think like what happened recently with the Atlanta shootings have just further solidified my purpose and my end goal in life, as because beforehand I was pretty lost about where I'm going with life and such, and you know I have epiphany moments that I realize I really need to do something for my community. I need to stand up, as put forward by all the experiences I had personally with in the education system. I had the racism I received. Just it's seriously it's like heartbreakingly to see those things happen. I have a 84-year-old grandparents who live in my house, and I'm worried about their safety. I'm worried about my parents' safety when they go out in the streets. My parents wouldn't even allow my grandma to go out because the level of hate it's within the society. It's almost surreal. It's in a civilized society that where racism is still prevalent and still ongoing. It's just unimaginable. That's why what happened with the Atlanta shooting just furthermore solidify my goal to get in the system to address this systemic issues from within.
Yeah. I mean, my thoughts are pretty similar to what everyone said. I guess more than scared, I feel frustrated mostly because I don't know, for the past life, like racism, it's present, it's here. Like some people might try to deny, like, oh, Asians, I mean, you get racism, that's like not that. No, it's always like, oh, just keep it to ourselves. We're not the type to complain. We are raised not to complain against our parents, unless you want severe punishment that I won't say, because yeah. But I've always been like pretty weak, and I just hate seeing how this happens and no one really cares. People don't even consider us as POCs, I feel, a lot of time. Like, we're not white, obviously, but we're not POCs either. We're just there, here, like invisible almost. And so for this to happen to us also, like the fact that it happens to anyone is bad, but that's why, like, recently, this is really random, but I've like added the Chinese flag in my Instagram bio. It was just a little thing, and I remember my mom being like, "Why did you do that? Like, you're first of all, you're born here. You're not even like that tied to China. Why do you gotta bring all that trouble to you?" And just like, yeah, I guess it is troubling, and I guess I might get in shit. Maybe, probably, for some reason, if someone sees and like stuff, but I don't know. I just want to in a place in a moment where like it's so not embarrassing, but it's so scary. Scary? I can't find the right term, but it's not good being Asian right now. I want to assert the fact that despite everything, I want to be proud of being Asian for once.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a follow-up on Harina's comment on the fact that we were meek Asians. One thing that I often hear repeated, and I still believe a lot of time, is the idea that Asians are quiet and submissive. But I feel like that's from one, the westernized media that paints the weaponized model minority myth, and also two, the toxic parts of Asian subculture that are not the good in the Asian heritage. Like, I mean, if our community, our AAPI community, keeps saying that we don't speak up, we don't fight back, then that's kind of like removing a ton of Asian history, and it's following exactly what Western history books have done to us. We're unseen because we were erased, undermined, overlooked, and it's not because we didn't speak up enough. But I do completely agree regarding the invisibility. Very real systemic forces have painted us invisible and verbally and physically assaulted us, hence the Atlanta shootings. And that's very real. But even more, these forces, it's what's convincing us that, oh, we don't speak up, so there's really nothing we can do. It's a system. But I feel like it's not something that we have to fall for. I feel like it's easy to think that there's nothing much we can do because how can you fight something that's always been a reality for so long? And that's why I feel like I'll give this floor to William.
Okay, thank you. You've all brought up very good points, and that leads to, I guess, the question is, what can we do? And what is there to be done? We live here in this reality. As one of the speakers said, we don't live in China, so there's nothing we can do about what's going on in China. It's up to the Chinese people to resolve their own issues and their own problems. We live in Canada. We all consider ourselves to be proud Canadians, and so we want to make this society better for all of us that live here. And I know, and myself included, because of the lockdown and the hatred that I'm bound to face when I go to the grocery store somewhere, that I can understand why a person would feel demobilized and demoralized. But nevertheless, we have to break out of this stereotype that we're in, being demobilized, and develop more critical thinking in terms of the news that we're bombarded with every day as to what's going on in the world. And the only thing I can say is that there is something we can do. There is, mobilization that we can do instead of just being in a passive situation. The first thing I think we should do is to know ourselves and to know what the struggle is. Do the research because it seems to be overwhelming. You may think you're just one person, but you're not. There's 1.5 million Chinese Canadians here in Canada. There's all the Asians that are in Canada. There's 4 or 5 million people, and so we have a lot of people. We have a lot of numbers. So it's just a question of how do we mobilize ourselves? How instead of feeling demobilized. the only thing I can say is that, and that's my own process, is to know myself, to understand what the struggle is, what we need to do to overcome this passivity, this helplessness that we feel that we're in. So we have to do that. We have to, and once we know, what the situation is, and develop some critical thinking on this issue, we get together with like-minded people. We get together with people who've experienced this. Get together with people who've encountered racism, or who've been attacked, who are survivors of racism. And as Dolores mentioned earlier, I think some of you have gone out to demonstrations, united with others within our community, and that's probably the first step we can do. So know ourselves, know the struggle, do our own research, and secondly is how do we organize ourselves? How do we unite to fight back against this helplessness that we feel today because of what the larger society is saying, and what the media is saying about us. So get together. I think this is the first step. I think there's 10 or 12 people who are on this seminar, discussing amongst ourselves as to what's the best course to take. So learn from what everybody's saying, and see how you can unite yourself. And dare I say that maybe you should form an anti-racist organization. I don't know whether there is such a thing. But if there isn't, here's a perfect opportunity to get out of this state of helplessness, is to get together with others in order to be able to fight back. And so once you're able to do that, then you can go out into the larger community and start educating people, educate other students at Marianopolis, because you have a big student body there. And I'm sure people are open to doing so, because out there, I remember, being such an old person, that after the 1995 referendum for separation in Quebec, Parizeau came out and said, well, we lost the referendum because of the ethnics. And so after that, yes, I was afraid to ride a metro to go to work because people were looking at me as one of these ethnics that caused them to lose the referendum. And then a few years later, there was the SARS outbreak. And again, sitting on the metro or sitting on the bus, people did not want to sit next to me because I'm such an obvious looking Asian person. And so these things are out there. But once you understand, people's visceral reaction to you as an Asian person, then that's the first step for you to try and work with them and make them understand that, as they say here for the pandemic, we're all in this together. And so put that into practical application, that we are in this together. But first of all, we have to, when you encounter racism, the first thing I guess you would like to do is to get together with other people that are victims of the same racism. So once you unite and start mobilizing people amongst yourselves, then you can go out there and start educating others. And so those are the three steps I can see. Is one is know yourself, know the struggle, do the research. Secondly, you mobilize and you unite people who have the same thinking, and organize amongst yourselves, and then finally to go out into the larger society and to educate other people.
Thank you, William. That's really touching. I didn't know that Quebec actually blamed the loss of the referendum on the ethnics. That was interesting to hear.
Yeah, the premier of Quebec at that time was Jacques Parizeau, and that same evening that they lost, they lost by a very, very small percentage. He he got up there in the media and said we lost this because of money and the ethnic vote. So I guess money he refers to the to the banks. I don't know what the money is, but the Quebec bourgeoisie controls the money here in Quebec. So I don't know what other money he's talking about. But the ethnic vote is what stuck with people, and so as a member of the ethnic community, I saw myself as being a target. It was the head of this province that targeted me.
And that brings us to the end of the roundtable.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to listen. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we did during the interview.
If you liked this episode, learned something, or just want to help out a bunch of students, please leave a review, write a comment, and share this on social media. If you are listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe and write to us in the comments.
All the books and other resources recommended by the interviewee are in the podcast description/video description depending on your platform, and depending on when you see this, you might be able to use our affiliate link to purchase them.
The Marianopolis Addendum podcast is actively seeking local sponsors here in Montreal, so if you are interested, please contact us at the email linked in the description. All the profit generated by this podcast will go back to fund our club's activity. If we have any surplus, they will be donated at the end of every month to a local charity. This episode was edited by Min, and the artwork is done by Camilla Huang.
The producers and guests associated with this episode may express their opinion, but this podcast does not support any political parties. We only aim to bring different perspectives on different issues through the free exchange of opinions and ideas.
We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Cheers!